Who's ready to go racing? I'm Tristan Ryans. This is episode 23 of the Lapped Podcast, 7 episodes into season 2, alongside Khaki Kevin Walker. Took a week off, but we're happy to have him back. Welcome back to the podcast,
I'm happy
buddy.
to be back. Happy to be back. Yeah, I heard you held it down for me while I was gone.
You didn't.
So
Yeah, I mean, if you listened, you would have heard.
yeah, well, that's kind of what I meant. But yeah, so I'm happy to be back, ready to get back into this, ready for this weekend, and I'll let you get back to your
Look,
introduction.
we're heading into the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, the final of a triple header between Japan, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. Following an exciting Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, this is your Destination Formula One podcast. So if you haven't already, please like and hit that subscribe button. It costs you absolutely $0, nothing at all to support the channel. Helps us move on up the algorithm. And feel free to follow us on the social medias. They're scrolling at the bottom of the screen down below. So if you're feeling dangerous also, feel free to share us with your friends. Plenty to dissect from Bahrain, though. I laid out a few storylines last week, so let's see how they shook out, starting with your boy, Lando Norris. I said that last week he needed to step up. Well, Kevin Walker, did he in fact step up for you?
No. In short, no.
No, he did not.
He did not.
That was a bad qualifying for him in the fastest car on track, landing a P6. Then he was shut down by a waning Mercedes driven by George Russell in the final closing laps on a bad compound, by the way.
Waning is kind of being generous, to be honest with you. Once we kind of got the final report of what all was going wrong with that car,
yeah,
I was like, you couldn't pass him in a rocket ship? Like, come on, Lando.
Yeah.
Like, come on. No, look, it wasn't a good weekend for him at all. He said so coming out of qualifying that he just didn't even feel familiar with the car, which definitely not what you want to hear. But hey, it's good for McLaren because guess what? We got 2 number 1 drivers, and Oscar Piastri swooped in and took the lead.
He sure did. I mean, look, but for Lando Norris, all intents and purposes, he lost by 14 seconds to his teammate. Not quite an ideal weekend. The compounds were right at the end. I mean, you and I were live texting during the race, and I was in absolute shambles. I didn't think Mercedes were going to finish, at least in the second place position anyway. George was in a good spot to finish P3, but I thought that it was like a slam dunk in the bag. It was going to go McLaren's way.
Well, yeah,
1-2.
You texted me and you're like, it's gonna be a McLaren 1-2, and you, for some reason, I believed you, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right, it's gonna be. And then once we were like seven laps to go, and I was like, I don't think we're gonna get a McLaren 1-2.
Dude, you and I were both as surprised. I think everybody in the viewing audience were surprised. The TLPs were probably surprised. If any reactions you guys have, by the way, let us know in the comments below, please. There's so much to dissect from Bahrain. On top of that, Lando Norris struggled to kind of get around Charles Leclerc for a little while there, kind of a not really overtake situation, and then gave the position back, and then eventually got him back anyway. But nonetheless, it just wasn't quite the weekend for Lando. If the McLarens hadn't put the right tire compound on after the safety car intervention, I don't even think that he finishes in P2 or P3, excuse me.
I think another thing, and you talked about that 14-second differential, and the one thing that I will go bat for my team as far as McLaren goes.
And 14 seconds isn't that bad over the full race.
It's not, but you also got to think about it. That is a rocket ship of a car. And I understand that he wasn't able to get past George, but it wasn't because the car wasn't faster. It was because George was doing an excellent job on his defensive strategy. He was managing his tires well. He was managing the entire car well, apparently.
George Russell was cooking.
And I say this in the most respectful way possible. He was holding Lando back. And I understand that that's not necessarily like, well, yeah, you got the faster car, but not all the time. Just because you have the faster car does not mean you can overtake. Does not mean that you have the skills to overtake. We've seen it in the past.
Are you trying to tell me that Lando Norris has a skill issue?
I wouldn't say he has an overtaking.
Look, my criticism for Lando coming out of this weekend.
It's an issue. He can't get past.
Look, but that's like good defense will do that to somebody.
True.
Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, yes, there was an absolute, difference between these two vehicles. There's an absolute difference in the driver skill, though, right? And that's where that offset happened.
I agree.
But at the same time, Bahrain is a really good overtaking circuit. There are multiple areas in which you can overtake somebody. He had multiple chances down the main DRS straight going into turn 1. There are 3 DRS zones. And in a car that not really sure if the DRS is going to work or gearbox issues, yada, 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 like not being able to overtake a waning Mercedes that was having
it's not a good
all the engine lights were popping up, Windows updates were queuing up for the Mercedes, like everything was going wrong.
Start on track.
And you can't pass George Russell in what is on paper supposed to be a layup. Good defense does a lot, but you're supposed to be able to pass a car.
And I'm not defending Lando and saying that that's not the case. I completely agree that that's the case. He should have been able to pass him. Really, no excuses necessary. No excuses really permitted in that situation. Your car is way too fast. You're in a much better position, and not to mention, and I don't want to, beat a dead horse, but yeah, the car for Mercedes was not good for George in particular. George had good defense. Lando struggled to overtake, and Oscar was there to pick up the points and do an incredible job. And
we know the talent's there for Lando, but I feel like at times he's just lacking in racecraft. Well, where George is compensating because of his racecraft and because of the on track smartness and the awareness.
I wouldn't
say Lando's inability to make overtakes in a faster car for multiple laps.
I wouldn't necessarily say that George is compensating for a car because we've really never had to see him compensate before. George is a very...
in this weekend specifically, though, it seemed like he was
George is a very consistent guy. Whatever the track is going to give, whatever the car is going to give, George is going to go and get that. And I'm not taking anything away from George. I'm not... He's a very talented driver. He's very good, and I give him his credit for doing the defensive job against Lando. But there's also something to be said about Oscar just having a good weekend, and we've seen it in the past where if Lando starts off bad, he's not going to turn it around. If Lando has a bad practice, if Lando has a bad qualifying, how many times have we seen Lando have a bad qualifying and turn around with a good race?
But I think that kind of adds to my point where the racecraft isn't there to pick up when the talent isn't there.
And I'm not saying that I disagree. If anything, I'm saying I agree. If Lando doesn't start hot, he's not going to get hot. With Oscar, we've seen, even as young as he is, and as much less experience as he has compared to Lando, we've seen him be able to turn a bad weekend into a good weekend. Maybe not with a win, but with incredible points or with an impressive performance or something to that effect. We've seen a lot more from Oscar in that competitive point.
And speaking of Oscar Piastri, the question I asked last week was, will he push McLaren? And Piastri is making things incredibly hard on McLaren, in my opinion. There's always going to be a lead driver debate, whether we like it or not, or if you're Kevin, maybe you don't enjoy that lead driver debate, where we have 2 number 1 drivers.
We do have 2 number 1 drivers.
But when you have 2 number 1 drivers, you have no number 1 drivers. And here's the thing. Oscar Piastri is, in fact, making it very difficult on McLaren to kind of put one cart ahead of the other, so to speak, right? Try to put one priority. Oh, well, Lando Norris was leading the championship. We're going to put a little more eggs in that basket. I know it's still early, but you could have begun those conversations a little bit earlier. And now Oscar Piastri is the first driver this season to have multiple race wins.
I don't think that that's going to necessarily be the case. Last year, we saw that. Last year, it was, put all your eggs in the basket for Lando because Lando's in the best position to win. This year,
I'm saying that this year he's making it harder for them to just do that.
But I don't think that they're going to have to. I don't really think McLaren's going to do that. I think McLaren is going to be look, we have the best car on track. We have the fastest car on track. And a lot could argue that we have one of the best lineups on the grid. Just go race. And whoever's leading at the end of the day is going to be who's winning. They're going to let them race. I really do believe that. I think they're going to let them race. I think they're going to let them compete. And I think if it came down to it at the end of the year and Lando and Oscar are neck and neck in drivers' championship points, I think they're going to let them race. I don't think they're going to put their eggs into one basket. I really do. I think if Oscar's leading, they're going to look at Lando and be like, well, look, y'all got the same cars. So
yeah,
what are you going to do? Are you going to risk? They're not going to babysit Lando because Oscar's leading just like how they're not going to look at Oscar and be like, "Oh, Lando's been here longer, so we're going to favor him." I think that's very clear. They're not going to do that.
No, but all this to say that Oscar is doing his job and then some. Like, he's not making it easy for Lando Norris for it to just be Lando Norris's year. And I push back a little bit on the idea that there isn't somebody leading this team, or there is an idea of somebody who leads this team, because when you have your team boss and Zach Brown going to the media and saying that it's going to be the Lando Norris era, that does show a bit of a partiality when it comes to who do you envision as a world championship level driver. When you're naming one and not the other, if I'm Oscar Piastri, for instance, I might take a little bit of a subtle offense to that, added to the bulletin board as like, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to ruin Lando's season.
Now, how do you know that? And I'm sorry, TLPs, this is not just a McLaren only podcast, I promise. But how do you know that Zach isn't just saying that because he knows Oscar? Because he knows that it's bulletin board material for Oscar.
I think making it a little bit more conspiratorial, I don't think that's necessarily the path, because overall it seems that Zach Brown has support. I mean, it's not even seems like he has supported Lando Norris for years and years and years at this point. They've believed in Lando Norris for a very long time. Oscar's only in his third year in Formula One, but he's doing an absolutely dominant job so far. Again, first driver this season to have multiple race wins, and the separation between the two is only 3 points. We're going to see this season literally defined on how this driver battle goes. I don't think, with all due respect to Mercedes, I don't necessarily think that they're going to be jumping into 2025, seeing how close they are and going, let's put everything we have into this, because they feel so strongly about 2026. This really is going to be a year defined by McLaren. And I'm saying that, to Oscar's credit, he's making it very hard on Lando Norris, and he's making it hard on the team to go, we're going to go in one direction or the other. And he's accomplishing the goal of, I want to be a World Drivers' Championship level contender.
I'm going to end off on this. Coming into this year, it was predicted that McLaren was going to be the team to beat. They had the target on their back. It was, hey, McLaren. This year is McLaren's year, and this year is Lando's year. And what is happening is Oscar's spoiling that.
Good.
And we'll see how Lando responds.
Look, in TLPs, let us know in the comments who you think is probably going to take this whole thing, this whole season. It's probably going to be back and forth. It's still going to be an exciting battle. Else. But like, who do you think is actually going to go on to win this championship after these first 4 rounds? Speaking of drivers with wins this year, I wanted to ask the question, was Japan a one-off for Max Verstappen? And maybe not for Max, right? I don't think that Japan was necessarily a one-off for Max as far as his level of performance, but I asked this question, was Japan a one-off for Max Verstappen? And for Red Bull, it might be. He finished 33 seconds behind Oscar Piastri in a tight field, so 33 seconds is still okay.
It was a pretty tight field.
But compared to how far ahead he was finishing in the Red Bull in like 2023, the most dominant season in Formula One history, where he was clearing other teams by margins of 40 to 50 seconds, it's not quite where you want to be if you're Red Bull. You're coming off of one of the best drives you've probably seen out of Max since Brazil last year, and the best he could do was a narrow P6 finish in the car, just edging it past the Alpine of Pierre Gasly,
which is crazy.
I mean, it's a rough back and forth.
And I mean, I'm going to go ahead and talk about Alpine just a small, tiny smidge here, because, and we'll get back to Verstappen, but I kind of expected Pierre to, I guess, fall back to earth a little bit. Like, I knew he would
going from P5 or P4 after the penalty to like a P10 or something like that.
Right. Like, I thought he was going to walk away with points, maybe, like a P10, P9 finish or whatever. Pierre Gasly, he held his own in a competitive field over the weekend. And like you said, it was tight. But look, we've seen the reports from ESPN F1 and different sources. It is not a slam dunk that Max is going to continue to be in that Red Bull seat. Now, me and Tristan were talking about it off air before. Where the hell would he go? I don't know. Mercedes looks like they're trying to get George back on a multi-year deal. I'd assume they're going to continue to race Kimi Antonelli. McLaren's, they got their lineup, locked down. Ferrari the same. So it would take a non-contender, if you will, to sign Max. And so Max is kind of in a weird spot, and Red Bull the same, where they've got to get this thing figured out, or they're going to lose.
They're going to lose Max to like Aston Martin because Lawrence Stroll is going to open up that purse.
$1 billion.
Yeah. So with all this being said, like,
I know that's not entirely what you wanted to talk about, but I did want to talk about that because it has been conversated about with.
I mean, that's going to be, and that's going to be
Max.
a conversation that we continue to have over the course of like the next year, maybe even 2 years, where what's it going to take and what does it look like for Max departing Red Bull, or if it happens at all. But circling back to the original topic, which was Japan a one-off for Verstappen? I mean, this all stems from this initial issue, which is the Red Bull is insanely inconsistent. They were having issues when it came to like braking, if I'm not mistaken, rear instability, and they just never quite got this car figured out. So for them to go all the way from a P1 race-winning performance in Japan to a, just barely scraping by for Red Bull standards anyway, kind of performance in Bahrain, it shows the volatility, I think, of this car in a nutshell. And I don't know if it's going to necessarily get better throughout the course of this year with an entire new regulation coming around the corner.
And don't forget about the couple of pit stop mishaps that Red Bull had as well.
Yeah.
I know that wasn't directly car related, but it kind of feels like just nothing is going to Red Bull's right now, including Max not being able to get 110% out of the car.
I don't think it's entirely true, though, because both of their drivers did, in fact, score points. So something is kind of going right, at least for Yuki Tsunoda, to give him some credit.
I would just say that is kind of.
I mean, he's getting better equipped in the car. I mean, I think he has proven himself to be the correct choice for that second driver seat.
And for sure. And I think the reason why we're not talking about it is because he is performing. But I would say getting points weekend for Red Bull is kind of just like, hey, yeah, you should be doing that.
Yes, I agree. But I'm saying that this is the first time since last year where both drivers have at least finished in the points. So that's just wild. That is something. I think it was like over 170 days since they had 2 points.
Shout out Checo Perez.
I know, right? So Yuki Tsunoda is making Checo Perez's life or pitch at Cadillac probably a little bit tougher. Oh. But one off of Verstappen, I think he's still got the talent level. I think the performance can still be there.
You can never count him out.
But their setup window has to be so on the money for him to be competitive. And I think there has to be a few more conditions that go their way. Like Japan was a bit of a thinner circuit. It was harder to pass on, right? But in Bahrain, easier passing zones, easier passing areas. And it left them a lot more vulnerable and a lot more exposed. And when we like even going into Jeddah this weekend, they're not going to maybe have all the straight line speed that they maybe had an advantage with over the last couple of years. I think it's possibly going to drop away from them. Another question I had, will Mercedes fight at the front? And I was pleased to report that they're close. They remained close. But I wanted to see George Russell standing at the top step, close to the top step. P2 is still pretty nice. Only 13 seconds behind Oscar Piastri over a full race distance, excuse me. That's pretty comparable to what we saw out of China. Depending on the upgrades after this weekend, they might.
I expect Mercedes to come with really good upgrades throughout the year.
Oh, well, their big upgrade package is going to come at Imola. That's the big, like, they're bringing small little tweaks as far as like interior things that you're not necessarily going to have to report. But the full upgrade package where it comes into like a floor, front wing, like, rear wing kind of situation, they're putting that all into one big package at Imola, and they're going to see how that works afterwards. They're not doing the progressive upgrades that like some other teams might because of focusing on 2026.
Now, I do want to give you this platform to talk about the absolute crap strategy that Mercedes did give on the tire strategy and what they did to Kimi.
I was very frustrated with that because when they pit him to go to the softs, it looked like at the time it was going to have to absolutely be a two-stop strategy, excuse me. With the result of the safety car being a 3-stop strategy, I thought, oh, this is an easy layup. They're going to move him into the mediums. And I guess they just ran out of mediums. I was frustrated with it. We texted about it, and I voiced my opinion on it, I think on Twitter at the very least. Unfortunate and frustrating for Kimi Antonelli, because he was on a pace where he very well could have landed back in the points and had a very solid weekend, had a nice highlight moment passing Max Verstappen on track at one point as well, something that a lot of other drivers are a little bit nervous to do, but he made it happen. I mean, it's your boy.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about.
But Kimi still had a very solid weekend, even though he finished outside the points for, if I'm not mistaken, the first time this season. The progress is there. The car is there. Things went a little bit awry, and even the team were willing to say that they had made some mistakes on the strategy calls as well. But frustrating as a Kimi Antonelli fan to see him land outside the points after another solid weekend. But I think they're going to hopefully have learned from their mistakes. That's kind of what I've got there. And a bonus, Ferrari. They looked a little bit caught off guard in Bahrain, but there are still some positives to glean from this. They looked like they were in a position where they could have won this weekend. The tire strategy was working. They pit late, but they were easily slam dunk passing cars on track that day. If I'm not mistaken, they passed Lando on track that day before the safety car, right?
Yes, I do believe so.
Yeah. So the pace was there for Ferrari. The upgrades seemed to have started to kind of work on race pace. There were questions about them during qualifying. P4, P5 isn't necessarily the result if you're Ferrari that you were hoping for, but I would argue it's something that has to do, things that are out of your control. Having to switch over to the hard tires, for instance. Apparently they ran out of mediums. Just straight up ran out of mediums. They had to make a compound change, decided that they wanted to go with more compound and less degradation over the course of the race. Opposite strategy, Mercedes and McLaren just kind of budgeted correctly and had those mediums ready to go and right there when they needed them. I think that helped hand McLaren the weekend. But all that to say, some positives, unfortunate result, but they very well could have won this weekend.
You really think so?
Yes.
I don't know. I'm struggling to find belief in Ferrari, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if they're, like I said, they got to keep bringing upgrades, but I mean, we'll see what happens. They just need a weekend to click for them, and they haven't had one yet.
Yeah. Well, they had China's sprint, but besides that, it's.
I mean, a sprint is not a weekend, though.
No, it's not the full weekend, but there are highs and lows. I mean,
on a weekend, but yeah,
but having highs and lows, there were signs of progress, and then they kind of fell away.
I would venture to say that Ferrari has experienced more lows than highs. You can hear it from Lewis himself. He's not entirely ecstatic about the car he's driving right now.
No, I think I would agree, but I'm saying that the performance fluctuation has been very high and very low at times, and right now it seems like they're back on the right track. They were, no safety car away from competing for the win in Bahrain. So in my eyes, they're making real progress. It's just a matter of, maybe something not going quite their way. Bad timing on the pit strategy. Mm-hmm. It just is what it is. But I wanted to wrap up one more thing. Yeah, you highlighted Alpine a little bit earlier, and I wanted to come back to them as well. Pierre Gasly had a massive weekend in Bahrain, landing P5 on track in quali, promoted to P4, finished in P7, right next to Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Jack Doohan, by the way, might have bought himself some time. Performed pretty well until the safety car threw things out of whack. Probably earned himself some cushion with Flavio Briatore. Alpine currently still in 9th place with just 6 points, but they turned a lot of heads in Bahrain.
We're getting a lot closer to that 6 race mark, and nobody's talking about Jack Doohan, and I think that's good.
Yeah.
If you're a Jack Doohan fan, I think that's good. If you're a Franco Colapinto fan, then maybe not.
Maybe you're regretting that decision for him to swap over to the Alpine.
But either way, good on Jack Doohan because he's been able to keep the pressure off of him because everybody's been worried about the pressure for Red Bull.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of like, I'm going to mind my business. I'm going to do my thing. Pierre had a good weekend. Alpine's looking pretty good for the midfield actually right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's still super early in the season, but Jack Doohan is doing the job that personally I think I was hoping that he would.
Yeah.
Walking into the season, he seemed like a slam dunk candidate to get replaced and that it was kind of an inevitability, but he's holding his own and doing very, very well. He's certainly not the worst driver on this grid, and he's learning as he goes. He's had some rookie moments as well that I think do kind of put him under that microscope, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But for all intents and purposes, Jack Doohan performed when he needed this weekend. As we walk into the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, I think it's only fitting that we talk about the storylines that are going to highlight this weekend. And as we round back to the top of the order with McLaren, both of your boys pitting themselves against each other. Lando Norris versus Oscar Piastri. Who's going to come out on top, Kevin Walker, in Jeddah?
I think this is a weekend where Norris has to get right. He has to get right. He has to turn it back on. And I think that this weekend is going to be a weekend that he does that. I think he's going to dominate. I think you could still see a McLaren 1-2. I mean, it is the fastest car on track until proven otherwise. But I do think that this is a weekend where Lando can kind of put it back together, kind of reestablish himself in the lead. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a good weekend for Lando.
I mean, I think this title fight that we're going to see over the course of the year is going to come down heavily to qualifying, as you alluded towards the top of the podcast.
Sure.
But in Jeddah, I think, yeah, you're 100% correct. Lando Norris needs to swing back and needs to swing back hard. He watched his teammate take the top step for the second time this year. And if Lando is built for this kind of thing, if Lando is built to win championships, if Lando Norris is built to be an immortalized Formula One World Drivers champion, I think he needs to start proving it. Because so far, I just haven't seen that bite from Lando Norris. He got through Australia and landed on the top step in a weekend that very well could have gone a different direction for him. It could have gone the way of Max Verstappen. It could have gone the way of a George Russell. It could have gone the way of Oscar Piastri had things not gone awry. Lando Norris landed there, but China didn't win the sprint, didn't win the race, obviously didn't win Japan when he had an opportunity to chase down Max Verstappen, couldn't finish the job, and I watched his teammate take Bahrain. The question has to be asked, and I think Jeddah and I think Saudi Arabia are going to be a great platform to figure out, if Lando is built for this, let's see it.
I mean, yeah, you raise all fantastic points there. There's not a whole lot more to add other than we just need to see it from Lando. We need to see that competitive fire, that competitive juice.
Yeah, because by comparison, Oscar Piastri seems in the zone. He seems laser focused. He seems ready for this moment and prepared for this car.
Well, these are two different drivers as well. Lando has been on record to say that, look, I'm not going to be like the Max Verstappens. I'm not going to be ultra dominant, ultra competitive, take this more serious than it. Like, he understands, like, the way that he goes about it is a lot different than Oscar. Oscar, while he does have his silly moments, he is much more of a killer, I would say, behind the wheel.
And those are the kind of drivers who win championships.
But I think that's why people root for Lando, is because he goes about it in a different way, where he's just like, look, this isn't everything. This isn't life. I'm not going to risk my life or others just to win a World Drivers Championship.
Look, like whether they win this weekend or not, I think that whichever order they finish in is going to be kind of telling at this point of the season. Like, if Oscar can pull another weekend in front of Lando Norris, the tide is going to start to kind of turn.
I don't necessarily agree with that, because they could just continue to trade punches.
They could,
not saying that every weekend is going to be a McLaren weekend.
And it's not to say that every single weekend Oscar Piastri is going to be hooked up and on top of everything perfectly. But I think over the course of the season so far, we've seen Oscar Piastri be better more consistently. And I think over the course of the full season, if this trend keeps up, it's not going to be as much of a title fight as we're hoping it's going to be.
I think it's going to be a title fight.
And we'll see. We'll see. But
let us know what you think. Let us know
right now, all I'll say, yeah, please do. Look, right now, Oscar Piastri is my title favorite.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Lando's my guy, though.
I know he's your boy.
And I will defend him, and I will also criticize him, but he's my boy.
Okay. Look, let's move on to another team down the grid, P2, Mercedes. My question for them, very similar to last week, can they capitalize? Jeddah is a high-speed circuit. It is one of the, if not the fastest circuit on the entire Formula One calendar. Only 2 slow-speed corners, and they have looked incredibly quick in high speeds this season. This might be their best chance at taking it to McLaren before their upgrade package at Imola. Your response to that?
My response to that is, I don't know if Mercedes is ready quite yet, but I also, and I've kind of been on this early, I don't want to discount Mercedes at all, because just because y'all had and I'm going to say bad weekend, but it really wasn't a bad weekend as much as it was just an untimely result for what happened to the car for George. And I think the strategy, for George, the car issues that he was having.
Oh, I see what you meant.
Now, as far as the strategy goes, Mercedes is not known to mess up strategies, for lack of better words. They're not known for screwing up strategies, for going with the wrong tire, or putting themselves in a situation where they lose because of something that they decided. If anything, Mercedes is known for swooping in and kind of taking over because other people make mistakes. So if anything, I would say if McLaren find a way to screw themselves, or McLaren find a way where they're not on top of their game, I could definitely see a way where Mercedes, does well, maybe a 2-3, something like that. But ready for the top step, I don't know. We need to see a little bit more from Mercedes, and I think they need a little bit more on the upgrade side.
In my opinion, Russell's been on top of his game. He's been incredible so far this season, and there seems to be a lot of confidence coming from the Mercedes pit wall that like this could be a really good weekend for them. They felt pretty good about Bahrain, and he ended up netting a P2, his best result so far. I think there's a real chance this weekend that Mercedes take that step, just because the car characteristics, from what I understand and from what we've seen, kind of fit all of the telltales of Jeddah. They fit what this track is built for, which is high speed cornering, and more or less built for overtaking, right? I'm excited to see what happens here. Kimi Antonelli, he's also familiar with this circuit as well. He spent plenty of time here in the lower circuits in Formula 2 last year. He also had a couple of races back and forth, the sprint and the race.
Overtaking.
So the kid's got balls. I think he can grab a P4 or P5 this weekend. Expectations at a minimum are a podium finish for Mercedes. I think at this level of the season, overall, you would want to expect a P3 at the very least. But
for George, at least,
this feels like a weekend where they could really up their game and take it to McLaren. Moving on, Red Bull rounding out again. Can Red Bull recover this weekend is my big question. That P7 or P6, P10 finish, Red Bull left Bahrain with a lot more questions than answers. This car's all over the place. Reports of braking, balance problems, beyond the pit lane light issues, even the engineering infrastructure down. It seems like it just keeps slipping away further and further for them. Do we think that Red Bull are going to net a stronger result in Jeddah?
I'm going to be more specific, because Red Bull is not the issue here. Yuki's already kind of cemented himself as that second driver. He's done good since taking over that spot. I think for Red Bull, you need to give Max a better car and a better opportunity, or else you're not going to be in the contending fight for a constructors at all. I don't think it's necessarily Red Bull.
I think the mission is nowhere close to constructors. I think it really is like, can we give Max another shot at a championship?
I don't know what
he's P3 in the standings as we stand.
Right,
and
you can never count out a champion like Max and a competitor like him. I think Red Bull need to focus on getting Max in a better position. I think Yuki's doing fine. Max needs all the help that he can get from that team. And pit stops, pit light stops, all those issues need to go away, and they need to go away fast.
Yeah. Moving along to Ferrari. Will Ferrari bring the fight this weekend? Like we mentioned before, the P4, P5 in Bahrain. You're just hard no?
I do. Look.
Do we even sniff them as a potential podium contender? I'm not counting them out at all.
From the start, I have not been in on Ferrari, and I understand that we've this is the best drivers lineup, and we've had those shorts and everything like that. But I am not all the way in on Ferrari yet. Now, I'm not going to discount them from a podium finish, but I think it's going to be Charles. I don't know if it's going to be Lewis. I think Lewis is going to take. I would say Lewis is going to need the majority of this season to really get in tune with that car, to really get in tune with that team and be in the Ferrari red. And I think next year is going to be the year for Ferrari.
I mean, I think they
don't know about this year.
Look, I think they built a ton of confidence in Bahrain. Like overall, you could see again, without a safety car intervention, like this team was on track, at least in my opinion, to be fighting for a race win against those McLarens. If the car's in the right zone, those upgrades seem to have kind of worked. At least they figured out a lot more. They've gotten a ton more data out of these upgrades. They're going to have a lot more of a clear idea of where this car stands and what they need to do with it. If I'm Mercedes, if I am McLaren, I'm keeping a little bit of an eye over my shoulder, because Ferrari, we're not that far away. Again, the pace was there. The drivers are certainly there. I think if you put the car in the right window, Lewis is going to work magic with it. Same thing for Charles. I wouldn't be so quick to count them out. They might not win this weekend, but they're not going to not be a threat. I'll put it like that.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. So we reached round 5. I think it's more than fair that we start talking about these rookies. I think we got to take a temperature check. I think it's time to examine where they at. And see what we're thinking about him overall. How do we feel about the rookie crop this year?
Well, we've already kind of discussed Jack Doohan a little bit.
Yeah.
And we've already talked at length about Liam Lawson from the start of the season to, well, I haven't really talked about him this episode, but in general.
But no, like let's go through on a quick fire perspective. So how do we feel about Kimi Antonelli so far?
I mean, Kimi Antonelli's everything that you want him to be and more. I can only imagine what that guy's gonna be able to do once he gets done with school. I mean, I feel that. I 100% feel that.
You looking at my notes? Because that's exactly what I wrote.
No.
When this guy isn't worried about math tests, just think about how much more he's gonna be able to put into his racecraft.
I love how the European language is like maths. Like it's like in plural. Anyway.
I have my math tests.
Yeah.
My maths test.
So Kimi's been fantastic. He is an overtaking madman. He does not drive the car like he's 19. So that's 18. Yeah. So that's crazy. I would say Kimi's off to a hot start, but we've talked about it. He's also in a really good position to
look, the car is superb. We get that, but he's making it work for him in a way that most rookies might not.
No,
my expectations walking into the season were like, look, if he's landing in the points, I'm pretty happy. My expectations were so low. And then he walks out and puts a P4 on the map and now we're crazy Australia.
Now we're kind of questioning if he doesn't get points. Like last weekend, he should have had points, but the strategy, the tires and everything like that kind of kept him out of that running. So for Kimi, A+, I would say for a grading if we're doing that.
Okay.
Liam Lawson, I would say he kind of found himself back in that Visa Cash App Red Bull car.
The Racing Bulls.
Yeah, the Racing Bulls car. So I would just say for Liam, maybe a B- because obviously he got demoted. But
you are the nicest person in the world to give Liam Lawson a B-.
I feel bad for the kid. Like I
didn't realize feeling bad meant giving out B-.
I mean, what would you do?
I would give him at least a D- to an F+.
Why?
First off, the confidence, unfortunately, is shattered because of Red Bull. Like, I'm going to give him a little bit of a leeway on that. But because you went from being the perennial number 2 driver, having one of the top teams at your disposal, to not even getting past like P15 on track in a car that, while it's rough, we've seen his teammate Yuki Tsunoda at least put this thing in the points now, put it in close to contention. He was within like a margin of less than a tenth of a second from being in a Q3 in back-to-back weekends.
Right, so, but Yuki is not a rookie. He's got way more.
Yeah, but you could argue that Liam Lawson wasn't a rookie.
Okay,
either,
but Yuki, yeah, okay. So let's say that Liam Lawson isn't a rookie. Yuki's still got years of experience over him. Yes. And he's driving a car with an engine that he's familiar with, that he knows, that he prefers.
But Liam Lawson also worked in that same engine for 2 years prior as well, through multiple race weekends. So it's going through the program and being familiar with the infrastructure.
But to call Liam a Honda driver is
but what I'm saying is, like, from a D- perspective, it's because you've made this, you walked into one of the better teams on the grid and you couldn't at least deliver into a Q2 at times. You were struggling across multiple formats. I can put aside crashing in Australia, like a third of the grid did. But if you're looking at Lawson's situation, it's tragic. And honestly, Red Bull have botched this as well. I'm not going to take away the other half of the issue for Liam Lawson, which is the infrastructure. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you still have to produce. The amount of stress and pressure that this kid was put under from get-go, that's a Red Bull issue at a certain level, but it's also a him issue. Walking in saying, oh, I'm not here to make friends, right? Now this guy could probably use a friend, right?
I just don't see it the same way that you do. I don't think he has a confidence issue. I think he understands the task at hand. I think he just needs to get right. And honestly, I think it'd be really beneficial for Liam to get out of the Racing Bull system as a whole, whatever that looks like in the coming future.
Look, like, I'm not rooting for the guy at a certain level. Like, I hope he can get back to the driving style we saw when he was at AlphaTauri / Racing Bulls, right? Where he was aggressive. He was making some pretty interesting overtakes. He was driving with a strong pace, and he looked like he belonged. And then something happened between Racing Bull's promotion to Red Bull and now back, where there doesn't seem to be a confidence, there doesn't seem to be a raw pace, and there doesn't seem to be that exuding of talent that inspired Red Bull to make that decision in the first place. I'm saying that there is a disconnect at a certain level. It's infrastructure, don't get me wrong, but at the other end of it, the conversations wouldn't have started if he hadn't been performing so poorly in the first place.
Yeah, okay, look, I'll take my grading down to a C, but even then, this is a Red Bull issue, and it's going to continue to be a Red Bull issue. Liam Lawson is the product of Red Bull absolutely screwing up something once again. And if Liam Lawson finds himself out of a F1 seat in the next few years because of this, it's going to be Red Bull's fault, because you put him in that situation and then didn't even really give him the chance to prove himself.
He will be the poster child for mismanagement.
But he should have never, ever been in that position in the first place. It should have been Yuki's seat and then give Liam another year.
You know, what I'm saying is, at this level, if he's out after this year, which is possible because of Red Bull being Red Bull, but if he's out after this season, he's going to be the poster child for mismanaging Formula One drivers. He just will be. Whether his fault or otherwise, Red Bull's infrastructure problem, yes, there are a lot of issues here. Unfortunately, he's not necessarily making a case for himself that would prove to Formula One fans, to pundits, that, hey, maybe they made the wrong decision to make the swap so early either.
Okay, well, Liam's not the only rookie.
He's got a teammate. He's got a teammate at Racing Bulls, Isaac Hadjar. In my personal opinion, he's exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, you did not like Isaac Hadjar at all.
I liked Isaac Hadjar, but I wasn't sure, because I did my preseason rankings. I had a lot more questions than I had answers. Like, I had more confidence in Ollie Behrman and Antonelli and a Gabriel Bortoletto. Hadjar coming in second place out of that F2 championship, having all the frustration that he had in F2, I had questions. So far, he has answered a lot of them. He's leading in the V-Carb so far. He's staying cool amid all the drama around him within Red Bull's organization.
True.
His first points were in Japan with a P8, 4 points so far on the year in total. He's hovering on points pretty consistently. He's doing a good job. I think for him right now, he just needs stability, and he's doing a solid bang-up job. Whether Yuki Tsunoda is going to be in this with Red Bull next year, do whatever Red Bull looks like in the next year, I don't know that Isaac Hadjar is not going to be a part of their plans. He's doing a really good job. I'd give him, in fact, I think I'd probably give him just a flat A at the very least. He's doing a good job.
I like an A. I think he's fit for the Red Bull system. Moving on to someone you already talked about, let's talk about Ollie Behrman. I think Ollie Behrman is slowly but surely becoming one of my favorite rookies, just in the way that he carries himself. Like, he doesn't seem like a killer or nothing like that, but behind the wheel or nothing. Like, he kind of seems like a pretty easygoing kind of guy. But the way he drives, I don't want to use the word madman because I already used it for Kimmy, but he does drive with.
He drives smart.
He drives smart, but he's aggressive when he needs to be.
Yeah, we saw that in China with all those overtakes. Probably should have been a driver of the day.
And while we were texting over the weekend about the race, I just kind of looked up and I was like, holy crap. I was like, look what Haas is doing right now.
Yeah.
And Ollie Behrman, we've seen a lot of drivers go in Haas and not do anything. And it's like, look, yeah, we just kind of come to expect that. Ollie Behrman is working a lot out of that car. For my grade, I would say for Ollie Behrman, I like an A as well for Ollie. I think he's really doing well in Haas, and I think he's proving himself to the grid that he's more than just a mid-level driver.
Yeah, if he wasn't stuck in the Haas, I mean, he's scoring points every single weekend. He had a P20 to P10 in Bahrain, even amid all of like the craziness. He had really strong performance there. He had a super strong weekend in China where he was overtaking pretty much everybody in the midfield and back. Ollie Behrman's good. He's going to be around for a while. We all knew that he was going to be good within the F1 world.
But you never know how someone's going to do with Haas.
Yeah. So like he's transitioned really, really well. The infrastructure there seems to be very solid. Driving in a Ferrari engine as well. He's doing a good job. He's another one of these really, really, really solid rookies. And rounding it out, well, we talked about Jack Doohan a little bit. I want to revisit Jack Doohan a little bit here.
I would say Jack Doohan for me is a flat B.
A B?
Just because he's kind of tempered off those not the expectations, but the pressure that he had coming into the season. We're 5 races in. We haven't really heard a whole lot of that drama as far as the 6th race check-in.
I think I'm going to be a little more critical. I think I'm going to be a little bit more critical. As optimistic and as much as I want to see this kid succeed, there are questions I still have about Jack Doohan. He's had more rookie moments. He's had plenty of rookie moments. He's had his fair share. He had the crash in Australia, which I'm going to kind of call a wash, but he had an incident with Gabriel Bortoletto in China. He completely destroyed the car in Japan during testing.
True.
So, like, he's had his slew of rookie moments that if he hadn't delivered in Bahrain, we'd probably be having a very different conversation.
And while I do understand that, and I'm not saying that he's the best rookie on the grid, and that's why I gave him the grade that I did, I think he's giving Alpine enough room to be like, look, I know you're making your mistakes, but we still have a little bit of belief in you.
Look, he's fighting. He's fighting.
You can't say he's made enough mistakes where it's at a point where we need to replace him.
I think Bahrain saved him, because if he had a really bad result in Bahrain, I think the Franco Colapinto conversations we'd be having them right now. I'm just saying that, because with the amount of damage that the car has been put through with all due respect, he's had some solid performances. Right now, he's staving off the pressure of a Franco Colapinto, and I think he continues to earn the seat that he's driving, right? But at the same time, if he has one more bad crash, like, that might just very well be the single break point. If he puts the car in the wall in Jeddah, flies off, and has, like a Lance Stroll moment where he just bins it, we're going to start having that conversation of like, man, like, we were already we were kind of on this 50-50 line, maybe a little 60-40 because we like the guy, but that could very well flip the other way any given weekend. I think that the seat isn't hot, but it's a little simmering, just a bit. Just a bit.
All right.
I think it's a fair thing to say for Jack Doohan, with all due respect.
I don't disagree with that.
And Gabriel Bortoleto, unfortunately, he drives for Stake F1. He's been pretty good, from what I understand, keeping up with Hülkenberg. He's keeping on track with one of the faster drivers from last year, but unfortunately, he is severely limited by probably the worst car on the grid.
Not a whole.
I'm going to give him a C+ at this point, just because it's hard to elevate this car. That's kind of where I'm at.
I don't think you can.
I don't know if anybody can.
Yeah. I don't know. Well,
he's getting his F1 wings.
Side
he's
note,
getting the experience of being an F1 driver without the literal like pressure of, hey, you need to deliver points every week.
He's just like, hey, please don't crash.
Because Nico Hülkenberg's got 6 this year. They're doing better than they were last year at this point in the year. I'm sure they'll probably snag some points at some other points as well. I think Gabriel Bortoleto scores points this year, but it's going to take a little while.
Side note. Put Max Verstappen in the
kid's also the reigning F2 champion. I mean, he
put Max Verstappen in the Stake F1 car. Where does he place?
P12.
Okay, I like that. I could agree with that.
Yeah, P12. I mean, Gabriel Bortoleto's really good. He's back-to-back F3, F2 champion. Unfortunately, he's in the slowest tractor on the grid.
Not Max's, though. Max is the tractor.
No.
Max is the tractor.
No. Max's is not a tractor so much as it is a
Just put a John Deere green sticker on that car.
Dude, no. It's like
driving the green.
It's like driving a unicycle with a Ducati engine on it. It's fast, but it doesn't handle very well.
All right.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. Kevin is back, so I think it's time to return to our favorite segment. Not that we skipped a beat really last week, but Kev Talks Track. It is Jeddah Corniche circuit. Now, you were prepared for this, right?
Yeah, I was a little prepared for it, but I know you did your notes.
Yeah. How prepared were you? Let's tell the people. Let's be honest.
I've got a lot going on. trying to wrap up school. I got a couple different jobs.
Dude, hey, look, TLPs. Look, we got to give love to Kevin. He's out here hustling. He's grinding. He's almost finished with his degree. You know, we'll give him a nice little round of applause once he finally finishes, though.
It all hit the fan.
But we're really excited. We're really excited for you. Look, speaking of Jeddah, we are here at one of the fastest tracks in Formula One on the grid currently, round 5, and I really enjoy this one. If you've played any of the racing sims at home, any of the F1 games at any point, honestly, this is one of my favorite tracks to drive because the margins are so thin. It's a very high-speed circuit. Room for error is very minimal, and you can't go slow here and expect to put up good lap times. 50-lap circuit, 6.174 kilometers or 3.83 freedom miles. Lap record held by Lewis Hamilton in 2021, the first year of this Grand Prix, at 130.734. We've seen a lot of records broken this year. I'm really curious to see if we might see a lap record broken, but I doubt it. 2021 history of this amazing Grand Prix. The epic quality showdown between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton with the lap from Verstappen that almost was. You've probably seen this clip on social media. Maybe you have or you have not, but where Max Verstappen is putting it through purple sector through the first two in a really, really, really close championship battle with Lewis Hamilton and then losing it on the final turn. So look, there's a lot at stake here. It's super high speed, very, very, very exciting. I love this track. You had a note. You wanted me to pass something along to you?
No, I was trying to tell you to move in a little closer because
I see. Look, 2022, we had a battle between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen that went down to the wire with Max winning it by just half a second. All things said and done. 2023, Sergio Perez took his first career pole position, would go on to win the race. One of the few races in 2023 that Max Verstappen would not win, on his way to winning 19 of 23 races, if I'm not mistaken. And 2024, some of the final legs of Verstappen's total dominance. Red Bull took a 1-2 with Sergio Perez in second place. So that is Jeddah Corniche Circuit.
Fantastic job.
Yeah.
Next week, it'll be Kev Talks track, though.
We'll hold you to it. It's time to move on to one of our final segments of the show, P10 game. P10 game update and predictions.
We don't have to do an update.
I mean, the people can see it here. 52-32. Kev's had a little bit of a rough time predicting these things on Wednesday. But
I went kind of on a ballsy move, and I was like, I think Charles is going to crash. I was like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like a big name's going to crash this weekend. And then literally no one did.
Yeah.
Literally nobody crashed.
Well,
we had a DNF.
We had a DNF,
crash,
which would have counted, though, if you would have been the first retirement of the race.
But you know what?
And it was the first retirement of the race. It was the only retirement of the race. And in my personal league, I picked Carlos Sainz to finish P10, and because of Yuki Tsunoda,
we're gonna keep
bidding him. I rounded out with only 6 points in my personal.
How many times have we picked Carlos Sainz to finish P10 this year?
You.
I've picked him at least twice.
Yeah, I don't think I have yet.
So that was your first time?
In my personal league, it was, yes.
In your last time?
But for us, I picked Fernando Alonso and then Isaac Hadjar to crash out, but Oscar Piastri proved me right, and he ended up winning. So it was a pretty good weekend for Tristan. Finished with 13 points. Kevin had a 6. So there's a 20-point margin, but there's still a lot of time to go. Who do you got for P10 this week?
P10 this week. Give me Yuki Tsunoda.
Okay. Yuki Tsunoda. What do you think about the first retirement, if there is any in Jeddah?
Yeah, which I didn't know that was an option. You texted me and you were like, I had nobody retiring. And I was like, I didn't know that was an option. Yeah, you never told me that.
That's an option.
So thanks for that. No, I do think there's going to be a retirement. I think that let's go with trusty dusty Lance Stroll.
He did crash here, if I'm not mistaken, last year.
Yeah.
Going back-to-back crashes. That'd be unfortunate. Who do you think is going to win?
I think it's going to be Lando's weekend.
You think Norris is going to win?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go unconventional for a little bit here. P10, give
Please
me
do.
Pierre Gasly. My first retirement, Yuki Tsunoda. The braking and instability issues are going to send him into the barriers. That's my theory.
That's good for me, because if I'm right, then you're screwed. But
yeah,
if you're right, then I'm screwed. But
and I don't think either of the McLarens are going to take the top step this week.
I know.
I'm going to go with George, number 63, Russell, to take the top step for
Just
the first
stand up
time
and
for
hit
Mercedes.
Just hit the pose. Yeah, you got to stand up.
I'm not going to stand up because I would lose the top of the monitor here. But with all that being said, this has been a longer episode than I think we were expecting it, to be completely honest, but a fun one nonetheless. That's all we got for you this week. Next week, we are recapping the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, bringing our reaction, all the drama and madness from Jeddah and more. Make sure to like and subscribe. It costs you absolutely how many dollars, Kevin Walker? 0. Nothing to help support the channel. Share it with your friends if you're feeling dangerous. Follow all the socials. They've been scrolling at the bottom of the screen this whole time. If you haven't followed us already, what are you doing? Until next time, be safe, be well, and let's go racing.